Ladies and gentlemen, dear partners and friends, welcome to the online panel Partners in Crisis 2, Economic Measures in Time of Crisis and Their Impact on Future Partnerships. I am Predrag Topić. I co-own and manage DX Lab, a boutique consultancy in the area of digital transformation, and I will be your moderator today. Joining me for this panel, my dear guests are Mrs. Marija Desivojević Cvetković, Vice President of Strategy and Development from Delta Holding, Mr. Duško Vasiljević, Senior Private Sector Specialist from the World Bank, and Mr. Milivoje Jovanović, President at Association of Entrepreneurs Startup for Your Business. Before we start, I would like to give you some key points. It has been said a million times this year, the crisis caused by COVID-19 is an unprecedented one. The pandemic has affected firstly global society, but also the world economy. After dealing with the utmost priorities, making sure the health systems are stable and providing adequate care for all in need, the main question asked in the previous period was how the European Union on one hand and the states individually on the other will recover their economies from the consequences and effects of the pandemic. The severity of these effects can be understood through looking at the total value of economic aid packages. The total value of these packages on a global level is currently $10,000 billion, while the global public debt amounts to 101% of the total world GDP. In translation, this means that the economic consequences of the pandemic crisis are compared more with the consequences of the crisis after World War II, and much less with the financial crisis of 2008. The need for adaptability of national governments and public sector was substantial. The same goes for private and civil sector as well. Majority of the companies and civil society organizations had to adjust and even change their business models. Considering all three mentioned sectors, private, public, and civil, maybe the most important takeaway from the past few months is that this triangle of crucial sectors completely understood that they depend on each other, and that they cannot make important results and improvements without mutual support, cooperation, and understanding. If we direct our attention to Serbia now, the government realized two packages of measures, which amounted to approximately 5.7 billion euros of value. The second package expires this month, and the question is whether and what new measures the state will take. According to IMF, if there are no new concrete measures this year, between 140 and 160,000 jobs will potentially be lost. The World Bank expects our GDP to drop for minus 5.6% in their downside scenario. There were huge drops of income compared to last year, especially within the SME sector. All of this, we can't help but wonder what kind of autumn and winter awaits us. So today, our main focus points will be what the main role of the most relevant stakeholders for managing this unprecedented crisis is. Following this, an important element of the discussion will be the measures taken by the government of Serbia in order to eliminate the consequences of the crisis. And some of the questions we will cover with our guests are how did the crisis affect both big corporations and especially small and medium-sized enterprises? And did they, through cooperation and partnership, manage to find some positive effects in order to eliminate the consequences of the crisis? Additionally, we'll try to find out, has the crisis also opened up new perspectives in work and cooperation, new opportunities for partnership? And lastly, we'll try to find out what is the outlook for the Serbian economy. Now, enough of me. I will give the floor to our esteemed guests, and I will start with one question that is same for all. On March 15th this year, a decision was made to introduce a state of emergency on the territory of Serbia, and we may consider this as the official starting date of the crisis. 6 months have passed since then, and it seems that the changes and adjustments that businesses and thus the entire economy have had to undertake are equal to the normal duration of several years. What is your general view of the previous 6 months from your perspective? I would start with Mrs. Desivojević Cvetković, so please, the floor is yours. we cannot hear you at the moment. Marija, do you hear me? It seems that we cannot hear you and that you cannot hear me as well. Okay, we can go to Dušan. Please, Dušan, if you can give your thoughts on the previous 6 months, because unfortunately we cannot hear Marija.
Sure. So thanks for the introduction and the nice summary of some of the key challenges. Like you said, previous 6 months have been a very turbulent period, and we have seen a lot of changes in the economy and some positive but also some negative developments. First of all and foremost, there are of course the health impacts of the whole crisis, but that's a whole separate topic and maybe for a different discussion. So I will not go in details on the adequacy of the response or the dynamics of the health aspect of the crisis. But in terms of economic impact of the crisis, it has certainly been significant. One of the sources that we used to assess the impact of the crisis has been a survey which we have done in partnership with a local think tank. Admittedly, this was done back in May, so before the second wave of the crisis, but we still think it's very indicative. And in that survey, we saw that vast majority of the enterprises were affected to some degree by the crisis. It is especially important to note that there were differences predominantly in terms of size of enterprises, with small and micro enterprises being affected the most, and obviously the sectors of the economy, with the HoReCa sector, the hotels, restaurants, and cafes, tourism and personal transport being affected the most. In our survey, as many as 73%, so almost 3/4 of micro enterprises were not able to operate at all, or operated with significant difficulties. This percentage is lower for larger companies, but still in all enterprise sizes, at least half of the enterprises that were surveyed expressed either either complete stop of operations or major difficulties in operations. Looking at the other indicator, this is the revenues of the companies. That one has also been quite significant, and according to the survey, about 3/4 of the enterprises had revenues which were below their original plans for 2020, and about half of those had losses that were 50% more than what was planned for the year. So in that sense, the impact was quite significant. On the other hand, one somewhat surprising development is the impact on employment, and in fact, impact on employment has been almost negligible. So we have seen some reduction in employment early in the crisis, in March and April, but then we saw a rebound in May and June, and by July, formal employment was back to pre-crisis level. So this is something which came as a bit of a surprise. One important caveat here is that this refers exclusively to formal employment. But then there is the whole other segment in Serbia of informal employment, which on aggregate is about 8 to 10% of the total employment. And in fact, in informal employment, we have seen much more dramatic developments. According to our survey estimates, about 75,000 people from the informal sector lost their jobs. And again, this depended heavily on the sectors. Many of these losses were in the HoReCa sector, especially in restaurants and cafes, where a relatively large share of population is of the employed people is with informal employment. So we have seen quite a sharp drop in informal employment. There was some rebound in informal employment, but we are still well below pre-crisis levels. We think this is interesting because in other crises, what typically happens is that the employers, especially in smaller companies, they tend to switch their workers from formal to informal employment to, avoid paying taxes or, other accounting reasons. So what you typically see in the crisis and what we saw in the crisis of 2008-2009 was a drop in formal employment, but increase in informal employment. This time around, it's completely different. We saw almost no impact on the formal employment and quite substantive impact on the informal employment. In terms of the impact of the crisis on enterprises, comparing to 2008-2009, this is a very different crisis. 2008 and 2009 crisis was driven by fundamental disbalances in the economy, both globally but also in Serbia. While in this case, this crisis has been almost completely exogenous. So it was not a reflection of some underlying disbalances. Although there were some disbalances in economies, both globally and locally, that were then exacerbated by the crisis. This crisis was is also in a way specific because it kind of pressured the enterprises from multiple channels. So we had demand pressure, we had supply pressure, we had financial and liquidity constraints, we had increase in uncertainty. So all of these have contributed to the impact of the companies. Just briefly, in the early stages of the crisis, the supply side factors, basically companies adjusting to the reduced working hours, lockdowns, issues with workforce transportation, inputs, and so on, were important driver of negative performance. But companies were fairly quickly to adjust to these, and since then it is the demand factors which have been by far the most dominant factor on enterprise performance, at least in Serbia. So it is the demand factor that was the key one driving the enterprise performance in Serbia. And one final point, and I'll stop there, is the macroeconomic situation. I think we had a very, very different macroeconomic situation in Serbia back in 2008 and in this crisis. On one hand, in 2008, we had very low public debt. Public debt was maybe 35%. Which allowed for some flexibility in response to the crisis, but all of the other macroeconomic parameters were quite out of balance in the 2008 crisis. And here I'm thinking about both internal and external balances. In internal balances, we have seen huge increase in fiscal deficit without clear idea how to contain it. In turn, this drove the rapid increase in public debt, which caused all sorts of problems for the authorities. In terms of external balances, we had a huge current account deficit. Current account deficit was over 20%. In turn, this meant that the country was heavily dependent on capital inflows from abroad. In the crisis of 2008, there was a sharp decrease in those inflows, in fact, reversal of capital flows to the country, which caused a number of problems. It caused a sharp depreciation of the currency. Most of the companies in Serbia and most of the households had their...
Thank you, Duško. Thank you very much for your elaborated view. I hope we can switch to Marija now. And I apologize to her because of the technical difficulties that we had at the beginning, and hopefully now they're solved. And I would really like for her to give her view on the past 6 months from her perspective and from the perspective of the company that she's in.
Now? Do you hear me now? You do. Okay, thank you. So I'll try it again. Okay, so from the perspective of the big company, I'd say I would agree that the COVID was a big crisis, although I wouldn't agree that it's the biggest crisis that has ever hit the world. It's just that it happened in our time. So for us, it is rather big. So for big companies, I think there are two main things that have happened in the last 6 months, though. The first one being actually being able to change very, very fast. So I don't think that COVID crisis is the one that actually brought the urgency for change, because the companies that don't change actually don't exist. So we all change all the time if we are successful. But actually what we got through this crisis was actually a huge speed up of everything that we've been actually doing in terms of changing the processes, the businesses, the way how we see our business, and so on and so on. So the huge acceleration of all the changes that we were as a successful company actually undertaking. And the other thing that was very interesting for this time was actually our great strive for keeping the business results. So being the big conglomerate, the company that was in some parts hardly hit by the crisis, and in some parts we actually had a completely different picture. It was very important for us to keep the businesses going, to make the businesses that are doing well helping those that are not doing well. So quick and very fast reorganizing of everything we do, of our main resources. And so these are the two main things that I see that businesses had to do in the last 6 months. Of course, before all of this, the most important thing for all of us was actually to take care of our employees and their families. And that's the thing that we are very proud of, saying that we did it in the right way.
Great. Thank you very much for this concise and very focused view. I will turn to Mr. Jovanović. What's the perspective from the SME angle of the past 6 months? Milivoje? Cannot hear you as well. Could you please check your microphone if it's on? Because it seems that we cannot hear you as well. The same situation as with Marija. Hear you, so please continue to. We have a confusing situation now. The part of the participants can hear you, and so apologies once again. Try to accept the invitation that the crew has sent to you. It seems that some participants can hear you, some cannot, but we can hear you. Please continue because most of the participants, sorry once again. Milivoje, please, just one more thing. If you can turn the translation, your translation to English. Please, so the people on Facebook can hear you. It seems that...
Smanjenje prihoda za većinu malih preduzeća, kao što smo već spomenuli i Dušan je pomenuo, mi imamo za većinu preduzeća, na primjer, u Srbiji rade sa vrlo malom maržom. Da nekako finansiraju svoje radnike i svoj kapacitet za duže periode, kao što je sa velikim kompanijama. Imamo drugu situaciju, iako sva preduzeća mogu da budu fleksibilni. Ovo smanjenje se udvostručilo. Mala preduzeća, naročito oni koji su paušalci, nisu mogli da se prijave na dodatne izvore za likvidnost. Sa logistikom i transportom znamo da svako koji
or packaging or whatever, or on the other hand with exporting those goods to EU or to other markets. So also with the lockdown, we had labor problems for most of the businesses who could not go and work from the home. It was a problem to maintain production and to maintain also sales of these products to their final customers. So the problems, as I told you, are very big. And we will see probably the results of all of that from the 1st of October. When we see that many of the workers will be redundant, definitely, and most of the companies who took this program from the government for the minimal wage, they have this condition not to let them down till this period. Afterward, I think we will have probably 200,000-300,000 of people who will be laid off after this crisis. The main problem, I think, with this crisis is that that demand changed, and the way that customers, either individual customers or business customers, changed the perception of the whole situation, and they're spending less money than and I think that also the state has influence on that because we had a massive panic in our state, and this caused people to go to instead to change way of life and to change spending, and especially for the small businesses which cannot be go in the price competition. So the businesses that produce products or services which are premium or of higher quality and which are not basic services, they are having really great problems. And I think that we will have this situation with the SMEs until we see what will happen with the demand and what will happen with the perspective, not only in Serbia, in the world, because most of our demand depends on the EU market and especially export, of course. But what will happen with the situation in the world? How long will this last? Because I think that neither of small businesses or entrepreneurs didn't expect this to last so long and to be as global as it is. And I think that businesses were unprepared, and it's not easy for a small business, although it is flexible, to change this easy business model and to change, and they don't have resources to do it so quickly. You don't have in small businesses, most of the businesses in Serbia are 1 to 10 workers, so micro businesses. So they don't have a special unit for supply, for sales, for marketing. So they cannot change that quickly, and I think that affected them all, and I think that they are really scared. And it's not shown till now, I tell you, until this contract with the state concerning workers expires. After that, we will see what the situation really is. And I think that although we are a small economy, with $50 billion of GDP, so this was not enough for small businesses to develop. But in this situation, with our GDP is going down, and this will definitely affect. I think that we will have definitely losses if you look overall situation concerning it.
Milivoje, thank you very much for your patience and your elaborated view, but we must speed up with the questions because already we are halfway through. The next question will be directed to Mrs. Desivojević Cvetković. Members of Delta Holding belong to different industries, as you said, and you already touched upon this, and they have been differently affected by the crisis. Can you give us some more insight to the most significant changes and consequences caused by the crisis that are common at the level of the holding? Significant adjustments that the entire system had to take. Yes, I can read it. Yes, please unmute Mrs. Desivojević Cvetković.
Okay, so I was busy unmuting myself and asking you to do that. So would you please ask the question again?
Members of Delta Holding belong to different industries that have been differently affected by the crisis. You already mentioned something related to that. Could you give us some more insight to the most significant changes and consequences caused by the crisis that are common at the holding level, and what were the most significant adjustments that you had to make on the group level?
Well, as I said before, when you asked the first question, we are very diversified. So we have many different businesses that were completely different hit by the crisis. So our hotel business, of course, was the one that got the worst and still is. But still we have agriculture and food industry that actually had a very positive impact of the crisis. So what we had to do was to react very fast and move the resources from one businesses to other. But the one thing that was common for all the businesses was actually taking care of our employees, and it was a very quick reaction when it comes to work from home. So we had almost 100 employees working from home all the time. We still have a big number of people working from home, but some of them are slowly coming back to our premises. So after 6 months, I can say that this work from home concept actually works in most of the situation. And we had we asked our employees how they felt about it, and 80% of them actually said that they were satisfied with the way their managers dealt with them, and that they understood what they are to do, and that they were happy with the way they did it. And also 90% of managers in our company said that actually they were completely aware of the way that people were doing their business, and that they were actually very happy with how everything went. So the only common thing for the whole company was that many people working from home, and we had to adjust to this. We had to get used to communicating like this today. So communicating online for operational businesses, for everyday work, it really works. And I think even in future, we might keep some of that. We found a little bit different doing brainstorming sessions and being creative over the laptop, not being able to be near other people. But I guess we will overcome that as well.
Thank you very much. Now the next question is directed to all of the participants. I will start with Mr. Jovanović. So in late March, the government of Serbia announced a package of measures to help the economy, as we mentioned. A new package was announced in July, and the city hotel industries are being helped in addition. What did these measures mean for SMEs, and to what extent have the SMEs used them?
Sorry. The liquidity is one of the problems that we...
Dobro, likvidnost je jedan od problema.
Funds for liquidity were not available for startups.
I sredstva za likvidnost nisu bila raspoloživa.
These measures that government had for the liquidity, also some other categories of small business, such as the one that are in flat rate regime, were enabled. So they could apply, also the ones who are targeted in the trade and sales sector. So this was good, but the thing is that it was too slow. And I know that at the end, the Fund for Development of the Republic of Serbia gave the credits to the better companies. So at the end, they didn't focus on the businesses that were most affected by this crisis. So they were mostly giving credit to companies who could have those loans also in commercial banks. And the idea of the Fund for Development and the Fund for Development giving these liquidity loans was to support the sector which could not be financed by commercial banks. Startups, but also companies who cannot apply for regular loans. So at the end, talking with entrepreneurs and small businesses, I see that most of them didn't receive those loans for the liquidity, or the amount of the loan they were unable to have was lower than they are needed. So the whole government measures, they will said it was like 5.7 billion, but at the end, if you look at the package, and that are not grants but loans, so the whole package was under 800 million, and the rest is something that should be repaid. And also giving this average minimal salaries for the employees of the companies. The thing is that the taxes on those minimal salaries must be paid by the companies after 1st of January 2021. So at the end, even for workers which receive 30,000 dinars, for the companies, they have all the burdens of tax and social benefits on those. So it was like 18,000 dinars, not 30,000 dinars. If you look what the companies will pay after delay and then after 1st of August. So I think that entrepreneurs and small businesses expected much more from the state, especially for those sectors which are mostly affected by the crisis. And the other thing we don't talk about is the regional development or underdevelopment of many municipalities and regions in Serbia. So I'm coming from the South Serbia, and I must say that in the regular times, not in new normal situation, in Serbia, or in Niš and in Belgrade or Vojvodina, we have 3 times less incomes and 2 times smaller salaries, also incomes of this small business. So this was also not predicted by these liquidity loans and other measures, so that underdeveloped regions could have some better conditions, or even with less collateral or bigger amounts to be given by liquidity loans for working capital. So I think that entrepreneurs in general are not satisfied, and that they are expecting not only to be finished with these measures now, but we know that most of them will have more than 12 months to recover, maybe even 2 years to recover. So I think that they are expecting more of these measures, and these measures to be focused on sectors that are most affected, and also to have in mind this different situation in some parts of Serbia which are underdeveloped. So I think more should be done, and should be done in the earlier period, and to enable also not only liquidity loans, but also to allow investment loans. In this moment, we cannot invest in increase of production because there will be no higher demand or sales. But this investment should go into increasing efficiency of production, in loans for innovations, for raising capacity of these companies to work with this number of units or services or whatever they do, but to do it more effectively, to have lower cost of production, because increase in sales we will definitely not have in the short period.
Thank you very much, Milivoje, for these concrete proposals. I will now direct the question to Marija. Duško, thank you for your patience, but we must talk with Marija right now because she has to speed up and leave the panel in short time. What is the view of the government measures from the point of a big corporation like Delta Holding?
Well, I would first say that it was a good thing that the government took the measures, and these measures were mostly turned to medium and small businesses, which I think actually was the great thing. And these are the businesses that we have to keep and that we have to help the most. Big companies usually can survive short-term crises if they're good. So, but even big companies depend on smaller cooperants and partners and so on. So I think it was crucial that the government actually helped smaller companies. Now, when we are more into this and when we are actually expecting the crisis to hit us even more by the end of this year and beginning of next year, I think it would be important if government would think about helping not broadly, horizontally, but actually vertically in terms of industries. So those that are mostly hit, which are tourism, entertainment, travel, and so on, those are the ones that I think should actually get more help than the others. So I think it's important now to not only go horizontally to small and medium, but also vertically to specific industries that are mostly hit. So we have to keep the jobs, we have to keep the smaller companies, so that we can keep their partnerships with large companies, and then keep the whole economy more stable.
Thank you very much. And I will now go to Mr. Vasiljević. What is the World Bank's view on the state measures? How do you evaluate these, both from the macroeconomic aspect and in terms of real effects and scope for the economy?
Yeah, I can only echo what other panelists mentioned. Our assessment is that the measures were needed, and they were mostly aligned with what other European countries were doing. There were obviously differences between different countries and different focus and so on, but in general, the mix of measures was appropriate for the crisis, and probably the size of the package was appropriate, having in mind the size of the crisis and also the resources available. That said, like Mr. Jovanović mentioned, deployment of measures was a bit slow. So we had this minimum wage compensation kick in only in May, so well after the first peak of the crisis. So having a faster response time is something that could have been done. In terms of specific measures, we found through survey that the ones related to the minimum wage were probably the most useful for medium and small, for micro and small enterprises, because for them labor costs are typically majority of the costs. So having support for these certainly was very relevant. Tax deferrals were also very relevant. The other measures like favorable loans through the development fund and so on, these were much less used by the MSMEs. Like again, Mr. Jovanović said, there was a tendency to extend these loans to the companies which were already performing well. So it's open to debate to what extent they actually alleviated constraints to broader set of companies. 2 points where, and I would like to close there. One is that the key challenge for the government is big uncertainty about the length of this crisis. So how much of your firepower, how much of your fiscal space do you want to use up now, and how much do you want to save for the possible second, third, fourth, whatever wave. So there is a lot of uncertainty, and it is really a difficult balancing act for the government. The other point, which was also mentioned by both panelists, is the issue of targeting, and we see that some targeting is probably warranted. We are not advocating complex targeting measures because issue of speed and responsiveness is very important in this context. But some basic targeting, like supporting specific sectors or maybe supporting companies that experienced losses and so on, would probably result in the same effects, but with lesser cost. Some rough estimates that we did is that more than 100 million euros of subsidies went to companies that had no losses at all. And additional amount, although we're not certain about this amount, went to companies where subsidies were larger than the amount of lost revenue through the crisis. So obviously there were opportunities for savings. The other estimate that we did is not so much on enterprise side, but more broader population side and the poverty rate. And the measure of 100 euros for each adult person in Serbia, that measure was effective in a sense that it completely eliminated the increase in poverty rate. So the poverty rate stayed the same as before the crisis. Without this measure, it would have increased quite significantly. But our simulations indicate that with good targeting, the same effect could be achieved with maybe 20 or 30% of the cost. So there is certainly quite a bit of scope for targeting both in enterprise support measures and households and citizen support measures. So I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vasiljević, and you gave me a really good intro for the final round of the questions. I will ask Mrs. Desivojević Cvetković first. There are different estimates, and as Mr. Vasiljević said, and uncertainties of how long the crisis will last and what it will affect. How do you see the further recovery of the Serbian economy, and what are Delta Holdings' plans in that light?
Well, first of all, I don't think that any one of us can say how long will the crisis last. That's the thing that depends on many different things, not only the vaccine and the virus, but I would say political and media things and so on and so on. So not knowing when it is going to end, it brings us to uncertainty, which in business is the last thing you would like to have. Uncertainty is the worst thing you can have, but now we have it as a black swan here. So as for Serbian economy, I would say that its position is not a perfect one, not only because of this crisis, but because of the starting point. So our economy was not good even without the COVID crisis. So when you have the low start and not perfect environment for doing business, that's a problem. Then you add the worldwide crisis, and then that adds the additional problem. So as for Delta, we always set very high goals, and we will do that for the next year as well. And we will try to even more diversify what we do. We will try to enter the new industries and new businesses. And that would be my advice to all the companies that can do that. But I think it's important for all of us to take care of our employees and to keep every single working place, every single job that we can. And of course, especially for bigger companies, it's very important that we continue to do our CSR activities. And usually it's the first answer to the crisis that companies stop doing their CSR activities. I think that's the wrong way, and we should continue doing that, as we will continue our project, Naše Selo, that we are doing for 2 years now. So every company should actually think about the changes and how it will be different now. And as for Serbian economy, I really hope that it will get better, and that the environment that we work in will actually improve and actually give us the opportunity to invest more.
Thank you very much. Now I would like to ask the same question to Mr. Jovanović. So what is your outlook on the length and the effect of the crisis, especially from the point of view of SMEs?
I think that it depends on what will happen in the world and what will happen in European Union and in United States. How will their demand recover? Because for most of the businesses, especially as I told, that export to EU or the other countries, and which are best from the SMEs entrepreneurs that we have, depends from the recovery of the demand. And I think this is the biggest loss of the crisis, because people lost some hope in further development, and then everything will grow in the future as it was in the last few years from the last crisis. So depends when the demand in the world will go back to new normal, and will this new normal be on the same level as we had it before, or it will be on the lower level? Which kind of needs should be recovered with products and with services that we produce, our economy produce. So I think it's this new normal is, from my point of view, back to basics. Which needs are really important, which needs can be upgraded, which needs can be solved by some innovation in production or in services, and how can we fit in this world again? Because I think that at the moment we are at some fog, so we must see what will happen, what will our partners in Serbia and of course in the world have, what will happen with supply chain, and with we already heard these small businesses are part of some supply chains for big international and domestic business. What will happen with their demand? And we see that in many countries in Europe, this kind of it's again with isolation policy. So some of the countries will not import any more products from other countries. They will try to develop it itself. We see examples from automotive industry that stopped because of the components and other stuff. So it's a big problem, and it needs a big solution. And it won't come from Serbia, but Serbia has to fit in this kind of way, and how to increase this pyramids of needs from basic that we are now to some higher level, and to enable our small businesses, which are mostly as I told, not in the economy of scale, but in economy that is for product with bigger quality and higher price. How can they fit in all of that? And depends on the world. And I think that we must think how to implement some new business models, but again, saying coming from the basic needs and to produce what the world needs again. And of course, as I told earlier, our economy is not productive and not working efficiently. So we must use this time to invest in increasing efficiency and developing new products and services that fit new needs of the world. Of course, we can use digital business models, but although it seems that we are IT giant, we are not. We are still economy where the biggest surplus in GDP in domestic product is in agriculture, in food sector, and some other main sectors. So we must try to use all of this knowledge and to more connect businesses in the supply chain, but also vertically and horizontally, and to have some overall and total strategies, a state, how to support economy, how to lower para-fiscal charges, how to make better business environment for the business and to have industrial strategy implemented. We have now new industrial strategy, but we don't have action plan. And we have to work on that and to have this whole economy more connected with better cooperation and with better support by the state and by all the institutions, of course, EU institutions and funds also.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jovanović, and I would leave the floor for the final answer to Mr. Vasiljević. So what is the view of the World Bank on the time and dynamics of the recovery of not only both Serbian economy, but the regional economies as well, the Western Balkan ones?
No, thanks. I think like other panelists have mentioned, this is really almost impossible to answer. So instead of trying to speculate, maybe I can pick up on two points which were raised by Ms. Desivojević, Cvetković, and Mr. Jovanović, which I think will be crucial when it comes to recovery, you know, whenever it comes. Ms. Desivojević, Cvetković mentioned several times the critical importance of employees and maintaining the workforce and finding modalities of work that ensure productivity even in these difficult times. And this is one of the challenges we see over the medium term as critical for the Serbian economy. So even before the crisis, we have seen a significant tightening of the labor market and many companies having difficulties actually finding labor, especially skilled labor. So, you know, we believe that policies that contribute to skills, that support companies, that support the education system in developing new skills and new knowledge will be critical. So unlike maybe 10 years ago when the main economic policy issue was high unemployment rate, right now we have a different issue where in fact we have very tight labor market due to emigration, due to various other trends. So skills of the employers will be a critical question for the recovery. The other point made by Mr. Jovanović is on the issue of hard versus soft investment. And one thing we have seen is that both in this crisis, but even before the crisis, most of the economic policy was focusing on hard investment, so to speak, whether it is attracting large FDI and supporting large companies, whether it's programs even for SMEs that focus purely on purchases of equipment and so on, which, okay, fine, those are needed. We understand why these are done. But we see that the gaps are really in skills, in capabilities, in productivity, technology absorption, technology spillovers, linkages, integrating local SMEs with larger companies. We see huge opportunities there. So we think that recovery, whenever it comes, should be taken as an opportunity to reset the economic policies and to focus much more on this quote-unquote soft investments. And critically, another point which was mentioned on business environment and in particular rule of law. So these are all things which were issues before the crisis and were deteriorating even before the crisis, deteriorated further during the crisis. So, tackling business environment, tackling rule of law, tackling consistency of implementation in regulations, we think these are critical, regardless how long the recovery takes. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vasiljević. And if we should take one key point out from today is that technology, like the crisis, is very unpredictable. So I would like to thank all of the guest panelists for their patience and for their adaptability and flexibility to finish the entire panel today. As for some key points from our discussion, from the business side, the panelists mentioned that the demand problem will be the one crucial to be solved in the next period, and that all the businesses and the state as well should take care of the employees and to make sure the labor market is up and running. As for the measures, we saw that our guests think that SMEs are the crucial sector from the entire economy to be supported by the measures. So that's something that the state needs to work on in the next period. And the targeting of these measures should also be a point of focus. I would like to thank the panelists once again for their time and for their really good insights. And I would like to invite the participants to answer the question which will be on the screen for the evaluation of the session. And thank you all for participating. Now we close the second day of Move.Link.Engage conference. Stay with us tomorrow, and all of you have a nice day. Thank you.